There was a moment this past NFL season that I can't stop thinking about. I was at the Carolina Panthers training camp practice with my guy Rashad, and we just sitting there in the stands watching the team go through their normal drills. We hear helmets popping, the coaches yelling, music's blasting, just the normal rhythm of a practice. A few rows down from us, I take a look and I see somebody that I recognize. I see Bryce's parents, Craig and Julie Young, just sitting there watching their son. No camera on them, no spotlights, just two parents locked in. And I'm not gonna lie, y'all, it took everything in me not to walk down there and introduce myself. Not because I was looking for an interview, not because I wanted a picture, not even because I wanted an autograph. It was simply because I'm a father. I'm a stepfather to Oliver, my 13-year-old, and a father to Cairo, my 3-year-old. And I'm sitting there watching them, truly locked in on Bryce. And I had questions, y'all. Real questions like, what did you do differently to raise someone like Bryce? Not just a great athlete, but someone who truly carries themselves the way he does. Calm, composed, grounded. But I didn't go over there. I let them enjoy that moment. And a few months later, when I heard Craig was writing a book, y'all, I didn't hesitate. I pre-ordered that thing immediately because I wanted to know. I needed to know and understand what I have observed from their family for so long from afar. And after reading this book, I realized something pretty quickly. This book wasn't just about Bryce Young. You know, of course, Bryce Young is all up and through this, but this book was about what happens behind the scenes. The decisions that nobody sees, the conversations that this family had that nobody heard, the sacrifices that these parents had to make that nobody talks about. And as I was reading this book, I kept thinking about my own life, right? My family, my own kids, how I was raised. And honestly, the areas where I can be more intentional as a parent. And the first thing that I want everyone to know before we kind of go into the details of what I learned, Craig made sure that you knew this particular statement before you even finished the book. It was one of the first things in here. And that is, there is no blueprint or secret formula to truly mastering parenting, right? And I know that you hear that a lot. People say it all the time. But honestly, reading this book, it really made me feel it. Because we're talking about Bryce Young here, a Heisman Trophy winner, the #1 overall pick. And even in this particular journey that Craig and Julie went through, there was no secret formula, right? There was no step-by-step guide, just decisions, adjustments, but most importantly, faith. And in doing the best you can in each individual moment that you have with your children. And that hit me because as parents, we're always looking for the right way, right? When in reality, there is no right way. There is no one way. It's just your way. Speaking of your way, you should always keep in mind that you are not alone in this journey. And Craig gave great detail in this book on how faith was the firm foundation of everything they stood for and experienced during their time raising Bryce. This is the first thing that Craig kind of mentioned, and it was all throughout the book, and I completely agree. Faith wasn't just something that they talked about, but it was truly how they lived, and that resonated with me personally because I grew up in the church, right? Youth choir, vacation Bible school, Bible study, church step team. I mean, I did all of that. I was the youngest on the church step team. And as I've gotten older, I've realized how important it is to bring that same foundation into my own household. Not the religious part about it, but having a personal relationship with God. Because when things get uncertain, that's what you can fall back on. The Bible says faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And when we can't see a way out of a situation, you have to have faith that God will always, in every circumstance, see you through it. And the Bible also says faith without works is dead. So you can't sit there idly and wait on something to happen without making sure that you put in that work. And those are things that I always try to tell my kids. And that's something I lean on is you got to work. Faith is work. And that leads to something else that I learned in this book. Another thing I learned in this book was the idea of sacrifice. And when I say sacrifice, I'm not talking about the version that we throw around so casually, but truly the realistic version. In this book, Craig talked about not going on family vacations, not spending money on themselves. It was really about making intentional decisions to truly invest in Bryce's development. And when I read that part, about the sacrifices they have made throughout Bryce's life, it made me look at myself a bit differently. Because there are days when I come home from work, right? Working that 9 to 5, and I'm tired, right? Mentally, physically, emotionally, I'm drained. And all I really want to do is just sit down and be in my thoughts and just relax for just a moment. But my sons are there after school, and they're sitting there and they're waiting on me to show up. They're waiting on me to come outside. They're waiting on me to play soccer, basketball, football, play games. Just give them my undivided attention. And that's when it really clicked for me after reading the sacrifices that Craig and Julie made and applying it to my life. Sacrifice looks different for every single family. And it's truly up to you as the parents to make sure that you get a return on that investment. Another thing that stayed with me after I finished reading this book was the idea of finding your child's Heisman moment. And I love that. And I love it because it shifts the focus for me. It shifts the focus in terms of not raising the next athlete. So when you hear Heisman winner, it doesn't mean raising the next football player. And it doesn't mean like living vicariously through your children. But it's all about discovering who your child actually is and what they're really drawn to, what lights them up. And I was able to see this in real time as I was reading this book. See, when the book came in, I'm sitting on the couch, I'm reading it, and my youngest, Cairo, comes by, and he grabs the book, and he starts flipping through the pages. And he sees the pictures of Bryce when he was young, when he was playing football. He's like, Dad, that's Bryce Young. He's throwing the football. And I watch a lot of Panthers games, and Cairo has unapologetically become a Panthers fan. So he's like, where's T-Mac? Where's Jalen Coker? Where's J.C. Horn? He knows all of them at 3 years old. And he's like, let's go through the football, Dad. I'm like, I put the book down. I'm excited. And I'm like, do I have my next Heisman winner here? But in all seriousness, in that moment, I realized something a bit deeper. That curiosity that Cairo had, that excitement, that's where it starts. And as a parent, we have to pay attention to that every single moment if we can. Not control it and not force it, but truly recognize it. And when we do, it's our responsibility to truly and intentionally nurture it. So another thing that I learned in this book is effective communication and intentional teaching. And this is one of the things I appreciated the most from this book because I resonated with it a lot. Craig communicated with Bryce from when he was a child to when he was an adult in a very intentional way. It wasn't yelling. It wasn't emotional reactions. It was truly intentional. It was questions. It was, why did you do that? What were you thinking in that moment? What led you to that decision? And he did that with Bryce at a very young age. And that stuck with me because I've had moments as a parent where my first reaction was correction, quick, direct, stern, and it may not have been helpful long-term for the kids. And I've caught myself in the moment of telling my child to stop doing a certain thing or a certain behavior. And I remember this one time, and I'll use Cairo for an example. I corrected a behavior and he asked the question, why? And without thinking, I said what I've heard growing up all my life, because I said so. And I know a lot of you probably have heard the same thing from your parents. And in that moment though, I had a quick out of body experience and I realized something. That necessarily doesn't teach anything. It just truly ends the conversation for that time being. And I felt as though my child deserves an explanation as to why I want him to correct that particular behavior, no matter how young he is. And Craig mentioned that he learned quickly how Bryce liked to be coached and ultimately corrected. And it was from watching a practice. He didn't just want to be told he was wrong or that particular position or how he was throwing the ball was wrong. He wanted to be shown the right way. And this ultimately made Bryce not only become a better athlete from a physical standpoint, but also from a cerebral standpoint. And what this book reminded me was, it's not just about correcting the behavior, but it's truly about teaching understanding, explaining the why behind every action, and then showing them the better way. Because when kids truly start to understand the reasoning behind things, they don't just adjust for that one time. They truly grow from it. And I feel as though Bryce Young is a very clear example of that. Another thing that really stood out to me in this book was the importance of knowing and understanding your limitations. See, Craig understood his limitations when it came to raising an elite quarterback. He knew he couldn't take Bryce to the highest level on his own. He didn't play quarterback. He played football, but quarterback wasn't his position. And instead of forcing it or ruining Bryce, he brought in or surrounded Bryce with people who could. Experts, coaches, mentors. And in my opinion, that takes true humility. Because as parents, we want to feel like we have all the answers. But sometimes the best thing that we can do for our kids is first admit that you don't have the answers. And then two, seek wise counsel. And that doesn't make you less of a parent. To keep it a buck, it actually makes you a better one because you have the best interest in your child and you teach them a valuable lesson. When you don't know or have the answers, you always use your resources to find someone who does. And I'm able to see that in real time with my oldest, Oliver. He's interested in soccer. Now, Carlo, I never played soccer. I usually play sports with my hands. So that's football, basketball, you name it. And he was really, really interested in doing that. Instead of me faking it till I made it, I went out there and I helped him. But we also, as a family, put him around resources that could better his skill set so that it did not stunt the growth that we're seeing in his soccer skills. And to me, that was the best decision that we could make. And we also showed him that if we did not have the answers or didn't know the way, we would find someone who truly knew the way and that could help his development to make sure that you become the best soccer player that you can be. Another thing that I learned in this book is the important relationship with development and time, right? There's some things that we innately just pick up. And there's some things in terms of development that really, truly takes time. So as I was reading this book, there was something that completely changed how I look at Bryce because we all see him now, right? Calm, composed, clutch, never too high, never too low. But what I didn't realize was Bryce wasn't always like that. There were moments where he responded differently to pressure growing up. And Craig mentioned seeing that in real time, right? Seeing him respond differently, not having that clutch gene, and where he didn't respond the way that people see today or people praise him for today. And Craig mentioned that he could tell from his demeanor whether Bryce was going to have a good or bad game. He could tell through his body language. If Bryce was locked in, enjoying the game, if he was loose, if he was smiling, he was enjoying the game, he knew what was coming. If Bryce had his head down, he was sad, he knew what was coming. And that's something that I've been saying for years now from my time of seeing Bryce play at Alabama and to now him in a Carolina Panthers jersey. And that's this. A smiling Bryce is a dangerous Bryce. And that hit me because it made me realize what we praise now was once a weakness, right? That composure, that confidence, that presence, that was built over time, right? It was built through repetition, through guidance, through growth. And that applies to everything in life that we do, not just sports. We are not finished products. Our children aren't finished products. And we and our children have so much room to grow and develop, which is why it's important not to label our children so early. What if Craig sit there and said, you know what? He just doesn't have that clutch factor. No. One thing that Bryce said is that we don't rise to the level of occasion. We fall back to our level of training. And that was shown through that clutch gene that we praise Bryce on. It was through his level of training. It built over time. So you have to understand that we need to continue and consistently develop our children. And over time, we'll start to see those things that we nurtured at a young age. Reading Growing Up Young confirmed an idea, now turned belief, that I've had for quite some time now. And it's about Bryce Young. And I've heard this a lot, but I never really bought into this idea. Whenever people see Bryce in front of a podium, doing an interview, speaking to reporters, people always would say, oh, he just always knows what to say. He is so media trained. We were never going to get a lot out of him because he's so media trained. However, after reading this book, although he may have had some sort of training, I see it completely differently. I don't think Bryce was well trained. I think he was well raised. Because when you are growing up in an environment with a psychologist, with a mother who's a teacher, and they emphasize being where your feet are, emphasizes controlling your thoughts, speaking positively about yourself and to yourself, and truly understanding the moment that you're in and visualizing it, visualizing the win, visualizing all that training that you've done to get you to where you are. That's not being media trained or being well trained. That's truly development. That's intentional parenting, showing up over time and showing up in the places where it means the most. So another thing that I learned in this book was the importance of having a strong support system. And this was shown throughout the book. Behind every successful person, there is some type of system. There's people, there's guidance, there's consistency, and it always doesn't look the same for each person. So here's 2 examples, and these examples were shown throughout the book. Well, one example was shown throughout the book, but I want to use another example as well. Let's take LeVar Ball. You all know him. Ball control, Mr. Big Baller brand, loud, confident, vocal, front-facing, and unapologetic in how he supported his kids. He even said it from the beginning. He spoke things into the existence of what his children were going to become. And he believed in those 3 boys before the world did. And then what happened? 3 sons who made it to the highest level of basketball. A global brand in the Big Baller brand. A family that turned a belief into reality. Then you got, on the other hand, Craig Young. Calm, measured, more so low-key, behind the scenes, not necessarily looking for the attention. He was really focused on Bryce's development. He was faith-driven, intentional, but most importantly, consistent. And what was the result? Bryce became a Heisman Trophy winner, the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft. But to me, I think the most important thing, and I would say Craig feels the same way, is that Bryce is a young man who is respected for how he carries himself on and off the field. Now, these 2 examples that I just shared are completely different approaches, right? They're 2 dads with completely different personalities. However, the result is the same. Their children were successful and made it to where they were dreaming and envisioning they would make it. And so it just reinforced something in me that I said before in the beginning of this video. There's no blueprint. There's no secret formula to how to master parenting. There's just awareness, intentionality, and showing up the way that your child needs. So when I finished this book, I didn't walk away thinking, I got all the answers now. I'm going to master parenting. I'm locked in. I didn't walk away with that. I didn't walk away feeling that. But I did walk away thinking, your boy got some room to grow. Not only as a father, but as a man, as a son, as a brother, as a friend. And that doesn't intimidate me. But what it does do is it excites me, because parenting in life isn't about being perfect. It's about being intentional, being present, being willing to learn while you're teaching your children. Because let's be real, at the end of the day, we're not just raising kids. We're shaping the next leaders. And to me, that's something that we must and should take seriously.